Alright, so welcome to the video. We're going to continue on with some right triangles. This time we're going to look at special right triangles. The two kinds that we have are 30, 60, 90. And the second kind we're going to look at is 45, 45, 90. So these numbers just refer to the angles in the triangle. So we're going to look at a triangle that has angles with degrees of 30, 60, and 90. And then triangles that have degrees 45, 45, and 90. But first we're going to learn about where these came from. So what I'm going to look at is I have an equilateral triangle here. So we know that an equilateral has all the same angles of 60 and then also the same side length. So if I made that one 2, then all of these become 2 as well. How I'm going to get my 30, 60, 90 is I'm going to take this equilateral and I'm going to cut it in half. I'm going to drop down its altitude. So I'm just going to cut in half. All right, so now I'm going to bring that triangle that we see out. So now we have something like this. We still have this side length of 2, but we cut this bottom length in half, so this becomes 1. And we're actually going to look for this middle side here. All right, we know that we drop down in altitude, so that this is 90 degrees. We have a equilateral triangle, so this one is going to stay 60, but we took this one and cut it in half. So this one becomes 30. And that's where our 30, 60, 90 comes from. So in order to solve for x, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the Pythagorean theorem. So I have my one side, so 1 squared, plus my other leg, x squared, is equal to my hypotenuse, so 2 squared. And that becomes 1 plus x squared is equal to 4. Subtract my 1's from both sides, so x squared is equal to 3. Square root both sides, so x is equal to the square root of 3. Nice. Okay, so right now we have the small side as 1. We have our medium side as the square root of 3. And we have our large side as 2. But what does that mean exactly? So let me scroll down here. What does that mean? What that means is that all 30, 60, 90 triangles, so all triangles that have the measures of 30, 60, and 90, are multiples of the ratio we just found. So 1 to the square root of 3 to 2. All right, so looking back at the top, looking here, we have that the small side is 1. If I made that anything other than 1, all I would have to do to get the medium side is multiply that by the square root of 3. And all I would have to do to get the large side is multiply your small side by 2. All right, and we're going to look at some examples here a little bit more into the video. But first, I want to go into our 45, 45, 90 triangle. So how we're going to start off and where it came from is we're going to look at a square. And we know that all of the angles in a in a square are 90 degrees. And we're going to look at a square with side lengths of 1. All right? And we're going to take it and we're going to cut it in half just like we did the equilateral triangle. But this time we're going to cut along the diagonal. All right, so cut along diagonal. Okay, so just like the other one, I'm going to bring this triangle out as well. So now we have something like, ooh, that's not the best equilateral triangle. Let's try that again. There we go. Maybe we can erase that inside. All right, so we know that this one is going to stay 90 degrees, but now we're taking these two angles and cutting it in half. So that gets us our 45, 45, 90 triangles. All right, we still have side lengths of 1, and now I want to find the diagonal. So looking here, I'm going to use Pythagorean theorem again. So I have 1 squared plus 1 squared is equal to x squared. So here we just have 1 plus 1 is equal to x squared. 1 plus 1 is 2, which is equal to x squared. Square root both sides. And so that we get x is equal to the square root of 2. All right? Nice. So again, what does that mean? So let's go back over here. This is going to tell us that all 45, 45, 90 triangles are multiples of the ratio 1 to 1 to the square root of 2. So looking back up here, that means if I take anything other than 1 and make this side, or either of these sides, which should be matching, anything other than 1, that means all I have to do to get my last side, or my hypotenuse, is multiply it by the square root of 2. All right, so let's look at some examples. So let's see here. I'm going to take that and I'm going to scroll down here. Okay, and we're going to resume this. All right, so this first one we're going to look at is a 30, 60, 90. So I'm going to mark my small, medium, and large with red, green, and let's just say yellow. Okay, so I know that since this is 90 and this is 60, that this must be 30 degrees. All right, so that makes this 9 over 2, or 9 halves, my small side. Okay, and next I know that my medium side is going to be across from my 60 degrees, so that's going to be my medium side. And my large side is going to be across from my 90 degree angle. All right, so how we're going to do this is we're going to start off with the ratio. And like I said over here, our ratio for 30, 60, 90 triangles is 1 to the square root of 3 to 2. So I'm going to put this up here, 1 square root of 3 to 2. And we're going to create our chart. So right now, we're going to put our small side under 1, which we know is 9 over 2. All right, then I'm going to put my medium side under root 3, which we know is y. And then I'm going to put my big side under 2, which in this case is x. So we're trying to solve for x and y here. And this is good because we always want to get back to 1 first. And to find y, what we're going to do is we're going to take the square root of 9 over 2, and we're going to multiply it with its ratio. So we're going to multiply it by the square root of 3. Okay? And what we're going to get when we do that is just y is going to become 9 times the square root of 3 all over 2. All right, and then again, to get our x, we're going to start back at 1 still, and we're going to go forward, but this time we're going to multiply it by 2. And that's going to just get us that x is equal to 9. All right, so that gets us at x and y, but let's look at some rules. So whenever you are going forward, you're going to multiply by what you are ending with. So what's the arrow pointing to? Whenever you are going backwards, you are going to divide. And you're going to divide by whatever you started with. Okay, and we're going to look at some examples of going backwards here in a little bit. So let's try a 45, 45, 90 triangle. So we know that since this one's 45 and that one's 90, that this one has to be 45 as well. And in a 45, 45, 90, you really only have the legs and the hypotenuse, so you can't really tell the difference between our small and our medium because they're going to be the same. Okay, so those two orange are going to be our legs, and this one here is going to be our hypotenuse because it is across from our 90-degree angle. So just like before, we're going to set up our chart, except this time we're going to look at our ratio 1 to 1 to the square root of 2. So we have 1, square root of 2. And it tells us that one of our legs is 3 root 2. Our other leg is y, and our hypotenuse is x. All right? So again, we're going to be going forward, and we're just going to multiply with what we are ending with, which is 1. So to get y, we're just going to take 3 root 2 and multiply by 1, which anything multiplied 1 is just going to be itself. All right? Now to get x, we're going to go forward, and we're going to multiply by root 2, because that's what we're ending with. So x is going to be equal to 3 root 2 times root 2. All right, we got to simplify this up a little bit. So we know that 3 and then root 2 times root 2 is just going to be root 4. But we know that the square root of 4 is 2, so we have 3 times 2, which is just equal to 6. All right, so x here is equal to 6. Whew. All right, let's look at a couple more examples. So first I'm going to go like this and then go like that. And we have our examples continued. So next, we're still going to look at here, our first one. So we have 30 here, 90 here, which means this has to be 60. All right, so now we're going to set up our 30, 60, 90. So again, we know our ratio is 1 to the square root of 3 to 2. And we're going to put corresponding sides in the correct position. So our small side is across from the 30, so that's going to give us V. Our medium side is going to be across from the 60, so that gets us U. And our large side is across from our right angle, which gives us 8. All right, so now this starts off with our hypotenuse. We don't want this. We always want to go back to the first position. So we always want to go back to 1. So always go back to 1 first. All right, and just like I said before, in order to go back, all we're going to do is divide by what we started with. So we're going to divide by 2. So to get V, we're going to do 8 divided by 2, which is just 4. All right, so now we know that V is 4. All right, so now that we're back at 1, we can take 1 and move forward to get U. And remember, whenever we're moving forward, we're just going to multiply by what we're ending with. So we're going to multiply by the square root of 3. So U is going to equal 4 root 3. All right, we got 2 more examples to go. The next one is a 45, 45, 90. So again, we only have our 2 legs and our hypotenuse. But this example is a little bit different because it gives us our hypotenuse. So again, we have our ratio of 1 to the square root of 2. And I'm just going to fill in my information. I know that my hypotenuse is 6. And so my legs are just going to be x and y. All right, so in this case, we always want to go back to 1 first, but we have 2 1s, so it doesn't really matter which one we go back to first because they're going to be the same. So I'm going to go back to this first position, however, and I'm going to divide by what I started with. So I'm going to divide by the square root of 2. All right, so x is just going to equal 6 over the square root of 2. All right, and guess what? X just equals y, so I just have to multiply this by 1, so y is going to equal the same exact thing. Nice. One more example to go. I'm going to look at number 3 here. And this is going to be a 30, 60, 90 triangle. So again, we have our small, which is opposite of the 30, our medium, which is opposite of our 60, and our large side, which is going to be opposite of our right angle. And I'm going to take my ratio again of 1, square root of 3 and 2, and then I'm going to put the sides in the corresponding position, so I know that 1 is going to be B. My medium side is 7 square root of 3 all over 2, and my large side is going to be A. All right, from here, remember we always want to go back to 1 first, so I'm going to go back and I'm going to divide by what I started with. So I'm dividing by that square root of 3. Okay, so I'm going to work over here. So I have that B is equal to 7 over the square root of 3 all over 2. But now I'm dividing by that square root of 3 as well. So these are actually going to cancel. So B is just going to be 7 over 2. All right, so I'm going to take that B out. And I just said that it was 7 over 2. And now that I've got B, I can move forward to get A, and I'm just going to multiply it with what I'm ending with. So I'm going to multiply it by 2. So A is going to equal 7 over 2 times 2, which means these cancel, so A is just going to be 7. All right, thank you for watching.